Hello and welcome to Hopeful Conversations. I'm Vicki Montague, and today I'm joined by Suzie Yeulett, who I met at the Big Three Principles Conference in London in the summer. And it was one of those sort of lovely experiences of walking out, having a little break from one of the sessions, walking out and finding Suzie sitting on a bench. I think you were listening to something and I very rudely interrupted you, but I did ask if I could sit with you, I think. And we entered into just a really lovely conversation and a beautiful connection. And we've had subsequent conversations, and I discovered all kinds of things about Suzie, which I'll let Suzie tell you. But one of the things that really stood out for me when I spoke to you, Suzie, was your journey with your parents both having dementia and both passing quite close together, I seem to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it really touched me, and I felt like there was just something really powerful in your story that I know people listening to this will get something out of. So I don't want to speak too much. I want to hand over to you, and I don't know where you want to start, but maybe just kind of telling us a little bit about, you know, what happened with your parents, mm-hmm. and how that all that kind of panned out, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. So my dad was first diagnosed with dementia, and he'd literally just turned 70, so that's quite young. And my youngest son had just been born really the year before. So yeah, I had very young children, and my dad deteriorating. It was more than just him forgetting where he put the car keys or where he put the car eventually.
Oh, wow.
And we all went on a family holiday together, and he kept thinking we were still in the UK. We were in Portugal. He said, "Why would you go abroad when you've got all of this here?" And we're like, "We just spent the whole morning traveling." So, you know, that was a journey of going to the doctors and getting the help and diagnosis. And it's all very tricky because the help is, you know, sounds wrong to say minimal, but you have to keep going back, and you have to, you know, initially you start going to a memory clinic and it's just sort of chatting really, and then you might get them to go to a day centre for a few hours, one day a week. And it's hard because my mum was then living with him and my brother was living at home as well at the same time. And then a massive blow a few years into that when mum was then diagnosed with it. And I feel certain that some of this, her stress of how she found it difficult to manage Dad's diagnosis, kind of accelerated perhaps her decline. But obviously my kids were quite young at that time. So it really is, I do feel really like in the sandwich generation, which people talk about. And I can see my friends in a similar situation where you've got older parents who are deteriorating, or not even deteriorating, maybe just getting older. And things change, don't they? We know that in our own bodies, things change as life goes on. And then you're managing dependent children and dependent parents. So it's that sandwich generation that I guess I feel I could potentially help. But then anyone who has gone through loss. So then fast forward a little bit, and mum and dad ended up in a care home. Because they accidentally set the house on fire. They had a small toaster fire, which was very shocking. But I'd had a message from one of the carers to say they'd left an oven glove in the oven, but the oven wasn't on and they weren't going to do anything about it. But something in my head said, you can't just leave this. So I kept on. And eventually we had this thing called a telecare system fitted. And then I could sleep better at night. But a week later, they had a fire. And it saved their lives because it basically calls the emergency services on detection of smoke or fire. And I think that's helpful for anyone to know who has parents in a similar, or knows anyone elderly who might be in that situation where they might not have the ability or wherewithal to call the emergency services, and it certainly saved their life that night. And of course, I've lost them both now, but not in that horrific. I mean, could you imagine? That would just been horrendous. So it was all tricky and sad, but you get on with life and you do the best you can. And then actually they're in the care home, and it was better because they were monitored and looked after, and they weren't having to cook. And whilst it was hard having them both ill, at least they were together. So I would go and visit, and I'd walk in and they were both sitting on the sofa holding hands. And so actually it made it easier in a way. Obviously doubly sad, but then they were together. So, I mean, I guess I've always been quite an optimistic person, so I do try and look for the positive in it, but that was a genuine positive. They were together. And then I guess towards the end of 2018, my mum fell and broke her hip. So that was a phone call out of the blue. And she went and had a hip replacement. And when she got back to the care home, it took a while, and it was quite disturbing. When I went to see her, she'd sort of fall asleep, look at me and go, "Oh, hi, you're here, how lovely." And then she'd fall asleep and wake up again and go, "You don't care about me." So it was very, I mean, literally up and down emotionally. And then, having thought, "Oh, this care home, it's not that nice," or, because it's not as nice as your own home potentially, because you don't choose it and you're living with other people. Then I couldn't wait to get her back to the care home and out of the hospital, because Dad was there and she would have been more comfortable. So we were seeing the physios in the hospital, and then saw physios back at the care home, and she wouldn't walk. So she just decided, I think that's that. So then she was in the bed the whole time. And I spoke to the care home manager and said, what do we do? And he said, "I think you just got to prepare yourself." So that was quite shocking, because I guess in our minds we thought that Dad may die first because he'd had it for longer. And again, it shows you just don't know what's going to happen when. You can't predict these things. So I spent a lot of time with her in that room where she was in the bed. She wasn't really speaking an awful lot, although the last thing she said was, "I love you," to me, which was very, very special. And so we spent a lot of time there. She wasn't talking much, so it was peaceful. And at that point, I remember feeling distinctly aware that about the power of my thoughts, just having the awareness that it was coming from the inside out, this experience. And if I sat there and thought, "This is too soon, it's far too sad, I can't cope with this," then obviously I felt sad and hopeless. Whereas if I thought, "This is amazing, I've had such an amazing experience with this lady, and she's been such a support, and we've had a great time," and I just felt gratitude and love, I felt full of gratitude and love, and actually happy, even though the circumstance had not changed whatsoever. So that was a massive thing for me. And I think it's helpful for people to know that. It's kind of, where you put your attention mentally, the direction of your thoughts rather than the content of them, and knowing that you can choose a new thought, wait for a new thought to come and choose a new thought that is more healthy for you. So I'd say that was my kind of biggest takeaway at the time. And the other thing was, it was very different from how I expected it to be. The feeling, whilst it was obviously not what I wanted to happen, it was calm, and it felt very natural, and it felt very peaceful. And I just felt as though I knew what to do, even though, of course, I'd never been in that situation before. And had I anticipated that situation, I would not have expected it to be like that. I would have expected it to be much worse. Obviously, she was dying. Ultimately, that's not good news. But I think it showed me that if you turn up and you have an open heart, and of course, she's my mum, so would have an open heart, but I accepted the situation and I felt very calm. And that just helped us both through what's a horrible situation. And when the carers came in to, give her personal care, amazing people that they are, they said she was noticeably more relaxed when I was in the room, even though we weren't necessarily talking. So I would just hold her hand and I would chat a bit, but I also reassured her that it was okay and that we'd be together in our hearts. And fast forward, like, it's been over 3 years, 3.5 years now, and I absolutely feel that that was true, even though I didn't know what I was saying at the time. I do feel her in my heart, and I don't miss her in the physical sense of the words. I feel she's with me. Not that she's sitting there and I can chat to her, but our ancestors are part of us. That's just a fact. They're within us. We are made from their genes, and of course we've lived with the person for as long as we've lived with them, so you're aware of their essence and the spirit of how they were, so you can still think about that. So of course I can't sit and have a cup of tea with her and a lovely chat and she's not watching my boys grow up in the way I'd hoped, but we still talk about her. I've got pictures of her, and so it is positive. And I've started a blog, which I'm sharing all of this on, because I feel like if I can help even one person who's coming to a situation where they have someone they care about has dementia, or just any kind of illness or upcoming loss, or if they've had a loss, the experience of it is never necessarily what we predict. So we don't know, so we can't, there's no point in making up a scenario and deciding how we're going to feel, because that's a waste of energy and it's just not real. And I think that's what gives people hopefully hope that if I can be okay when I was extremely close to my mum, it wasn't how I expected anything to happen, and it happened quicker than I thought. If I can be okay with this and have got through it with grace, or whatever, however you want to say it, and genuinely feel okay, I think anyone can actually get through a loss. And I think it shows we have that innate resilience within us. The human spirit can't really be broken. It might feel like it at times, but if you can look for that space within you, that calm, quiet space of presence, I think we can get through anything. And I think that's kind of the point of life, is for us to come and have this amazing human experience. I mean, it's a miracle we're here. And having just watched the Queen's funeral this week here in the UK, which was very moving, whether you're a royalist or not, the images on the TV were quite stunning. And obviously it was a big, long, drawn out ceremony, very different from what we did to my mum, which I can talk about later. But, the images of London and the Union Jacks lining the roads, and inside Westminster Abbey, I mean, it's absolutely stunning, and it's a privilege that we live here on this amazing planet. And I think England is beautiful. And seeing things like the Abbey, if you just stop and think for a minute that there is no other known planet, as far as I'm aware, that has buildings like that that either occur naturally or have been made by anybody. And I think that helps us to put this journey of life into perspective, because it's amazing that we're here. And I think we're here to create. And whether that's mentally through your thoughts, your imagination. I mean, I'm a designer, so I do make things, which is, I find, quite fascinating, because I think of something and then I can create it. I think we're here just to embrace life fully and make what we can of it. So yeah, I think if you look from a kind of higher perspective, almost at the fact that we are on this planet spinning around in an unlimited universe, it's just amazing we're here. So if we can somehow think about that, I guess it's less personal. You're not thinking about me, little me, and my problems and how do I fix things. You know, there isn't really anything to be fixed. We just really need to turn up with an open heart and make the most of our amazing experience here, I think. And so, yes, at the moment I've started my blog, which is called Life by Design. My design business is called By Design, so it kind of comes full circle, really. Just to share the experience and the hope, and offer any support if I can to anybody. But the other thing I've just started doing is volunteering. So I just feel I just want to help, serve, help people enjoy, embrace life, and just see how amazing it is that we're here and what can be achieved and that we can get through anything, really.
It's just such an amazing story, and like I say, you've shared it with me before, and I've just got goosebumps again listening to you talk about it again. And there's several bits that I kind of want to pull out, I guess, for people listening who might be wondering or asking the whys and hows. At one point you were talking about how you noticed that you could have a different experience of being with your mum dependent on what thoughts were going on, and how your feelings were a kind of reflection of what was going on in your mind. And I know for most people who are new to the conversations that I have here on the podcast, there's a temptation to think that you deliberately changed your thinking. Like, before I came across the 3 principles, I had done a lot of personal development, and it was all about changing your thinking. I did neuro-linguistic programming, which was all about sort of making it quiet or moving it away, or sort of playing around with thought. And yeah, I just kind of I want to unpick that a little bit more, because I know that's not what you were saying at all.
No. And I've said I've always been quite an optimist, a positive thinker, but I think this is about the fact that thoughts are energy and they come and go all day long and even all night long when we're asleep and dreaming. So we don't have control over what energy, thoughts, vibrations, whatever you want to call it, are going on around us. That's just nature. But I think it's more about being aware that the thoughts themselves and the content of those thoughts only really take on any power when we give them our attention. So, people have talked about, thoughts being like clouds in the sky floating by. And obviously, if you hook onto one and think about it more, then you're giving energy. You're giving more energy and attention to that thought. So it will become bigger because you're thinking about it all the time. Whereas if you just try and settle, it doesn't mean change the thought. It means just wait until another thought comes along as best you can. I don't think you can change a thought that's already been thought because it's already then formed, but you can choose to do your best to think of something else or wait for another thought to come along.
Yeah, and I think what's really worth pointing out as well is the sort of misunderstanding that we have about feelings, in that if we feel bad, it's somehow like we have to act on it. Like there's something urgent that needs to be done. And I think what we talk about in this conversation is when we feel discomfort or tightness or just an unpleasantness that it's telling us that there's some busy thinking going on.
Yeah,
it's the invitation to step away and not to act. So it's kind of the opposite way. Like we often, we might feel all that, and we might think that means that we need to do something. And what we're saying is, no, it's the invitation to see that we've got a busy mind that we've got caught up in, and that when we step back and pause, that those thoughts will pass by, and there'll be fresh thoughts behind that clear that kind of that feeling within us.
Yeah, I think people often refer to it as your feelings being your kind of internal GPS system. And if you're feeling tense and urgent, then that is generally a sign that you could slow down a little bit rather than getting busy and acting. You don't have to act on all your feelings and all your thoughts, I guess. So yeah, I think having this understanding of our true nature is just helpful in that any sign of tension or negative feeling, you don't have to worry about what that means. I know that one of my sons can err on the negative side a little bit, and I've thought before in the past, oh my goodness, what does that mean? Does he need some help? But it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. We don't have to worry about that. We can just try and help him through it, help him be calm and peaceful, and just reassure him it's okay. They're just his feelings. He doesn't need to act on them. So that's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, and I think that's so helpful. Another thing that came up when you were talking was, and I just wanted to sort of again clarify this for people listening that might not be familiar with what we're talking about, but you're obviously very calm, and the way that you told the story of your mother passing and the experience of all of that, and I kind of get the sense that there might be some people that are reading into that, it's not okay to be sad, it's not okay to be upset or to be distressed by the loss of somebody. So yeah, I just wonder what you might say to them.
Yeah, and I must admit, it surprised me how I was and how I am about it. And so I did go on a bit of a journey of looking into that, just in case there was a problem. And I was sad, and I still get sad, of course. I can't say hand on heart, I wish, it wasn't different. Of course, I wish my mum was still here. She was nipping about and she was fully part of our lives. But that's just not reality. So I read Michael Neill's Super Coach about a year after mum had died, because I was setting up a second business with a friend and I just thought it might be interesting. And he referred to this thing called the 3 Ps, and it just kind of explained my experience to me. And so it's not about not being upset. I'm not trying to be cool, It's just a feeling. It all felt okay and natural. Yes, I still cried and I still got upset, and I still do get upset. But my overall feeling is I am okay and she is okay. And I guess, it was more about the fact that if she'd have stayed, she would have been not walking, declining more with dementia, and potentially quite fed up with life. And who am I to say, oh no, stay, I can't do without you. So I think it's that taking it slightly less personally, and I'm just understanding the nature of our experience here, and the fact that just be grateful for what you've got whilst you've got it, because no one knows what's going to happen to any of us. So
I think that's so key, isn't it? Because the one thing that we know is definitely going to happen is change, always. That there's going to be change, and we're all going to pass.
Yeah.
But the one constant thing is that nothing's constant.
Mm.
Everything changes, and I think, you know, what you said then, it's about being present with what is. We can so easily go into, and I know that I have myself gone into there, well, what would I do if this happened, and what if this person died, or what if this you know, like all of the what ifs and the imaginary future, and how would I deal with that, and whilst we're caught in that, we're not here living our lives. We're in our minds in a creation of something that doesn't exist. And life right here in this moment is happening without us almost.
I think that sort of power of now is so significant. You know, if you live in your traumatic past, as in you're thinking about it all the time now, you're not there now, but you are bringing that to your experience now. And likewise, if you're worrying about what might happen in the future, you've got anxiety over something that may or may not happen, or is due to happen, even like giving a talk or something, you're just giving yourself a hard time now for something that is just entirely made up in your head. It's not reality. And my oldest son has epilepsy. Luckily, it's very well controlled now, and hopefully, touch lots of wood, it's okay. But when he first started having seizures, he had one during the day, and when he was going to bed at night, because they often happened at night generally, whenever he went to bed at night, for a while he was saying, I don't want to go to sleep in case it happens, and what if it happens when I go to school? And obviously I was thinking that as well. But I just said to him, there's no point in us thinking about what if. I said, what is happening now? Nothing. Do we need to do anything now? No. I said, okay, so let's relax, realize that everything is okay now. And if something happens, we're all here. We all know what to do. School know what to do. We will act based on what is happening in that moment. And that really helped him to get to sleep, but it also really helped me to let go of worrying about what if it happens when he's at school, because all you can do is your best in that moment. And planning is good in terms of giving the information to the school about what they need to look out for, what the triggers might be, any signs. But once you've done that and you've put your whole heart into doing that as best you can, then you just have to trust the process of life. And I think that's really freeing, because we don't know what's going to happen. I think we are guided. You know, I felt very guided when I was sitting with Mum, and that was something that was in me, but it was also like it was something coming through me to help me be calm, and like that universal innate wisdom that comes to you when you really need it most. So I think we can trust in that, but you can. So I think we're guided, but I think you can also have an intention and visualize what you would like, because we might as well visualize the positives, how we'd like things to be. And then we've just set our own kind of direction, really. And then you see what happens. You don't know what the traffic's going to be like. Something can happen any moment when you're on a journey on the road, but you can set your destination from A to B and do your best to get there in one piece and deal with whatever comes up. And I think that's life.
I love that. And it's something that I always invite my clients to look at for themselves, is that kind of, you know, in the past, when you look back and you remember things, did you know what to do? Like, you know, for all of us, we forget that things have happened to us that haven't been easy, but we're here telling the story of it. So we knew what to do in that, like, even if it didn't feel like we did, something got us through that. And I think that's the most beautiful realization to have, because for me, it was one of the massive things that moved me from living in a worried future of what ifs to knowing that oh, actually, if any of those things happen, I'll just know what to do. It's always been the case in the past, so it will always be the case in the future. And
Well,
that
and
enables.
also,
Go on.
sorry,
I was going to say that.
you know, we could just make up a billion things that might happen. We'd just be
Yes.
very busy
Yeah.
worrying about every potential
Yeah.
scenario that could occur. And then the one thing we haven't thought of is likely to happen. So it's just, that makes it sound ridiculous because it is a waste of time. And so we might as well just trust the process that is life. And I think if you have that understanding and awareness, then it helps you just to live in the moment and enjoy as much as you can. And if you're in a bad mood, we all have ups and downs in terms of our state of mind, and that's okay too, you know.
Yeah, that it will pass. Like I love that, you know, your whole journey with your parents, and just, to me it just sounds like so much presence, staying with the reality of what is, which is so generally difficult for us to do. You know, our mind is so kind of designed to think about the worst case scenarios, to keep us safe in that respect. And it's like, just in what you shared, just that staying with reality. Okay, so my mum's not well, my dad's not well, my, you know, their memory isn't great. The practicalities then that come in, oh, I think, you know, getting this system in place so that there's an automatic link to the fire station if there's smoke detect, you know, like there's just so much practicality to staying in reality, because when we come out of it and we enter into the mind's created stories, we might miss those practical things. But
I think it's
to stay in that, in the, okay, what is true right now in the moment? What do I know? Rather than what's the mind creating, and the scary stories that inevitably are going to be drawn up there. To come back to, what do I know right here, right now? It's just so powerful in what you shared.
Yeah, to me it's the difference between your intellectual brain, which is there for our survival, it's to keep us safe, and that looks at what's happened to us in the past that we might need to be aware of to keep us safe from it happening again. We know what to do next. Sorry, there's a car just starting up outside. Hope it's not too noisy. And then our innate wisdom, which just flows naturally to us. You don't need to go and learn what to do about everything, because if you trust that calm presence of mind, then the wisdom that you need to know will come to you. It's reliable. You can't learn it because it's kind of real time. It happens in real time. So I think that's the difference there. It's the difference between our brain and intellect and our innate wisdom that will just come to us when we need it, if we allow it. And I think you allow it by being calm and present. And that just happened by nature of the situation for me. And the thing I thought at the time was, I'm just accepting what is happening. Acceptance was my kind of main word at the time. If anyone asked me how I was coping, it was, I'm just accepting what the situation is and doing my best. And that's really it, isn't it?
That's everything, right?
Yeah.
Like it seems to me like the only suffering that happens is when we fight against what is.
Yeah.
And that's so hard.
Yeah.
But your story is just such a beautiful example of what happens when we accept what is. How can we say if it's right or wrong? It just is.
Yeah. And if you can't do anything to change it, it's kind of a waste of energy. And I just thought, yes, mum and dad are ill, but when I'm with them, I'm going to be with them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be worrying about it. I'm going to be actively just enjoying their company.
So lovely. I think that's a perfect place to just wrap up, because yeah, just bringing people back to even just that, if they took one thing away, acceptance and the power of that, that would be an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And before we go, I'd love you to just let people know, obviously you've said about your blog. I'll put the details of that below in the show notes, but do you want to just tell people how they could get in contact with you? Otherwise, like, do you have an email address, or what's the
yes,
best way?
so life-bydesign.co.uk is my blog address, and I'm at suzie.bydesign on Instagram, which is probably an easy way for people to get me. And it's Suzie with Suzie.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear from anyone. I love having this conversation, and I think the more people that talk about this, the better. And thank you so much for having me, and it's lovely to see you again. I'm so pleased we met.
I know, so am I. It's so lovely to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And yeah, I will catch you again soon.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Suzie.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.